She was just 24. And on her wedding night, she stood alone in a palace, married to a 75-year-old sheikh. Everyone thought it was for wealth. But what happened that first night? It shocked her. And changed countless lives forever. This is not a fairy tale. This is a true story. Of pain, sacrifice, unexpected love, and a legacy that still heals the world today. Stay with me, because the ending will touch your soul. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of the powerful, life-changing stories we share here. And if this story touches your heart, give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and join our growing community. This is more than just storytelling. Each episode carries a deep lesson to inspire, heal, and uplift. Let's grow and learn together. This is a true story. Noura was only 23 when she agreed to marry Sheikh Omar. He was 75. A wealthy man. Powerful. Respected across the region. Her village whispered behind her back. They said she did it for the gold. For the silk dresses. For the palace she would live in. But they did not know the truth. They did not know that Noura's little brother was dying. And Sheikh Omar was the only man who could pay for the surgery. She said yes with trembling lips. She walked into his grand palace with tired feet. Her eyes were swollen from silent tears the night before. The marble floors sparkled under her shoes. Ornate chandeliers floated above like stars frozen in time. Incense burned in the corners, soft and floral. The silence was heavy, like an unanswered question. That first night, Noura sat on the edge of a silk-covered bed. Her heart beat so loudly she could hear it. She braced herself. She waited. But he did not come. Not immediately. Sheikh Omar entered later. Slow, elegant steps. A man with time in his eyes. Wrinkles like soft rivers across his cheeks. He wore a white robe. And a gentle smile. He did not sit on the bed. He walked to the window. Looked out at the moonlight. Then quietly he said, "You are not here to be afraid." His voice was deep. Warm like fresh bread. He turned to her, eyes kind but tired. "I know why you came." Noura's hands clenched the sheets. She looked down. She felt the weight of shame. But his next words struck her like a warm wind through cold stone. "You saved your brother." He walked toward her slowly. Not like a man seeking a young bride. But like a father trying not to startle a lost child. He knelt in front of her. His knees cracked. "I married you not to take something from you," he said. "But to give you something you have never had. Safety." She began to cry. It was the kind of cry that comes from somewhere buried. Not for fear. But for release. For the first time in months she slept deeply. Wrapped not in silk. But in peace. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Sheikh Omar never touched her without asking. He brought her books. He listened when she spoke. He taught her how to ride horses. She taught him how to make sweet tea with cardamom. And then came the children. Not hers, but his. 3 orphans from a cousin lost in a desert accident. They arrived wrapped in dust and grief. The youngest, Lena, clung to Noura's legs like a vine. Noura fed them, bathed them, sang them to sleep. She grew into motherhood like a tree reaching for sunlight. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Sheikh Omar sat beside her in the garden. The stars above blinked like curious eyes. The fountain whispered nearby. He placed his hand gently over hers. "You have changed this house." She turned to him, her eyes softer now. "You gave me the space to become something more." His hands trembled slightly. But his voice was steady. "Will you stay?" She nodded. Not because of obligation. But because she had found a home where she never thought one existed. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was the middle of the night. A storm rolled across the desert sky. Thunder rumbled like distant drums. Lightning lit up the tall arches of the palace. Noura was awakened by a whisper. Not a sound, but a feeling. A pull in her chest. She rose quietly from bed. The silk of her nightgown brushed softly against her ankles. She tiptoed through the marble halls, past the children's rooms. Always calm, always still, until she reached Omar's study. The door was slightly open. A flickering lantern burned inside. She pushed the door gently. Sheikh Omar was on the floor. One hand clutched to his chest, the other reaching toward a wooden box on the shelf. His face was pale. His breath was short. Noura ran to him, heart pounding like war drums. She held his head in her lap. His lips moved slowly. "I am sorry," he whispered, "for not telling you. I have been ill." Tears spilled from her eyes. She held his hand tightly. "You are not leaving me," she said. Her voice cracked. "You are not allowed." The lantern shook from the wind outside. Omar coughed, then smiled. Even then he smiled. "You have already given me more life than I ever expected." He gestured toward the box on the shelf. She opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens. All written in his hand. "To be opened when I am gone," one envelope said. Another read, "For Lena's wedding." One said simply, "For Noura on a lonely night." A sob. The kind of sob that had no sound. Only shaking shoulders and a heavy chest. But he was still breathing. Barely. She shouted for help. Servants ran in. Doctor arrived. The hours that followed were long. And silent. But Omar survived the night. He lay in bed for weeks. Noura never left his side. She fed him by hand, read to him, sang softly while he slept. His strength returned slowly, but his spirit, it was strong, and something had changed. Their marriage, once quiet and careful, became something greater, deeper. They laughed more. They held hands in the garden. The children began calling her Mama, without hesitation. One morning Lena brought Noura a drawing. It showed a house with 5 hearts inside. Above it, in clumsy letters, she had written, "Our forever family." Noura looked at Omar, who was sipping tea, eyes twinkling. And she realized something. She had married a man for duty. But in the process, she had discovered the truest kind of love. Not love from fire or passion, but from presence, illness, sacrifice. A love that held your hand in the dark. That stayed awake through the storm. That left behind letters. For every moment you might feel alone. And that was the night she stopped being afraid. The night her heart, finally, came home. Years passed quietly, like pages turning in a well-loved book. The desert winds came and went. But inside their home, peace lived like an old friend. Omar's health remained fragile. But his soul grew younger with every laugh of the children. Every warm meal shared under the garden's olive tree. Every quiet evening with Noura resting her head on his shoulder. He had once feared dying alone. But now he feared only missing the next morning's sunrise with her. Lena grew taller. Jamil learned to play the oud. Sammy, the quietest of the 3, began painting dreams on canvas. Noura encouraged them all. She helped with their lessons, dried their tears, celebrated each tiny triumph like it was a gift from the heavens. One day, the local school invited Noura to speak. She stood in front of a room full of young girls, some curious, some judgmental. They had all heard the whispers. They all knew. She married the old sheikh. But when she spoke, there was no shame, only grace. "I married a man who saved my brother," she began. "And I stayed because he taught me what love truly is." The room fell silent. Her voice softened, but grew stronger with every word. Love is not age. It is not beauty. It is not about what others think. Love is the choice to see someone's soul, and be seen in return. She looked out at their wide eyes. "If you are lucky," she said, "you will find someone who gives more than they take. And when you do, you build something greater than a life. You build a legacy." That night, when she returned home, Omar was waiting in the garden. He held a small box in his hands. Inside was a delicate necklace, pendant shaped like a tree, with 5 tiny stones for leaves, each one carved with an initial. He kissed her forehead. "You gave me a family," he whispered. "You gave me roots." Her eyes filled with quiet tears, not from sadness, but from a joy too deep for words. Years later, when Sheikh Omar finally passed, it was in her arms, peaceful, grateful, whole. His letters were read on special days, weddings, birthdays, lonely nights. They spoke of forgiveness, of second chances, of love that does not shout. These days, and Noura, she continued to raise the children with a strength that never sought praise. She told them stories of the desert, of kindness, of a man who once gave everything, not for love returned, but for love believed in. This is a true story. A story of a young woman who married a 75-year-old sheikh, and found in him a teacher, friend, partner, and a home. Not all love begins with butterflies, but the best love, the kind that lasts, is born in the quiet moments, the long nights, the softest of hands holding yours. When the world feels too heavy, years moved on like soft wind over the dunes. The palace no longer echoed with Omar's voice, but it breathed with memories. The children grew. Lina became a teacher. Jamil traveled the world with his oud and songs inspired by their father. Sami opened an art school for orphans, where every painting had a story, and every story had a soul. Noura remained in the home Omar built, but she was no longer just a wife or a mother. She became a guide, quiet guardian of stories, of strength, of soft resilience. She started a foundation in Omar's name, offering scholarships for children in the village, medical support for families like hers once was, and a place for women who had been silenced too long. They came to her broken, shame, and she welcomed them, listened, held their hands the same way Omar once held hers. She told them stories, real stories, of how pain can be heavy, but kindness can carry it, of how love is not always wrapped in roses. Sometimes it comes dressed in silence, with a wrinkle-framed smile, and shaking hands that still choose to hold on. Each year on the anniversary of Omar's passing, she would sit under the olive tree, alone at first, then slowly surrounded by the children and the lives they had touched. They would bring his letters, reread them, laugh, cry, remember. One letter, now yellowed with age, always sat closest to her heart. It was not addressed to a child, nor for an occasion. It simply read, "To my beloved." She opened it every year, and every year it said the same words. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer beside you, but I am still with you. In the rustle of the leaves, in the warmth of morning light, in the smile of every child you touch. You were the light that found me in my dusk, and because of you, I did not fear the night. Thank you, Noura, for loving a tired old man, and turning his final years into the most beautiful beginning." She never read the letter aloud. It was her secret, her promise, her strength. And when Noura's time finally came, many years later, the world did not lose a woman, gained a legacy. Her children buried her beside Omar beneath the olive tree, under stars that knew their story. A plaque was placed between them. It did not list titles, nor wealth, nor years. It said only, "Where love chose to stay." And that is how true love lives. Not in diamonds, not in stories filled with fire, but in patience, in sacrifice, in letters left behind, and in the quiet, unbreakable devotion of a heart that dared to believe in something greater than itself. Years after Noura's passing, the palace remained, but now it was more than a home. It had become a sanctuary, a place where lost souls came seeking peace. And somehow, they always found it. The olive tree had grown tall and wide. Its branches stretched like arms embracing the sky. Children played in its shade, laughing without fear, their voices dancing through the courtyard, like music from another time. Lina now ran the foundation. Her mother's strength echoed in her voice, Her father's gentleness lived in her hands. She greeted every visitor with the same words her mother once used. "You are safe here." She kept the house just as it was. Omar's study remained untouched. The books still lined the walls. The letters still sat in the carved wooden box. Once a year, she opened the home to the public. Not for show, but to share what it meant to love without measure. Young women came in search of hope. Young men came in search of direction. Elders came just to remember what it felt like to believe in goodness. In the main hall, tapestry now hung, woven with images of Omar and Noura, the children, the olive tree, and a sunrise in the desert. At the base of the tapestry, a single embroidered line read, "Love is not counted in years, but in the lives it shapes." Sami painted that image before he passed it to Lina. Jamil composed a melody to be played beneath it. And whenever someone asked how it all began, Lina would sit them down and tell them the story of a young girl who married an old man, of a choice made in desperation, of a night filled with fear, and the kindness that shattered it. She would describe the silence of that palace on the first night, the weight of Noura's heart, the trembling in Omar's voice when he said, "You are not here to be afraid." And every time, without fail, tears would form in someone's eyes, not because the story was sad, but because it was true, because it was beautiful, because it reminded them that even in the hardest moments, even in the quiet corners of a storm, there are people who choose love, people who choose to stay, to hold on, to believe. And in that belief, they change everything. So if one day you find yourself beneath a quiet sky, uncertain, tired, alone, remember the girl who married a 75-year-old sheikh. And what happened on the first night was not tragedy, not loss, but the beginning of something eternal. A story written not in fairy tales, but in letters, in lullabies, in the laughter of children, and in the roots of an olive tree that still stands, still grows, still whispers, "Love stayed here." And so the whispers of their story never faded. They were passed from voice to voice, from heart to heart, like treasured songs carried on the wind. Travelers came from distant lands to see the olive tree. They sat beneath its shade, closed their eyes, and listened. Some swore they could hear the faint strum of an oud. Others said the breeze carried the scent of cardamom and rose. But all of them felt something. Not just peace, but presence. A sense that love had lived here, and still lingered. One day a young girl arrived alone. She was no older than Noura had been. Her eyes were tired. Her hands clenched the strap of a worn satchel. She had lost her parents, had no one left, and she had walked for 2 days to reach the gates. Lina welcomed her with warm tea and gentle silence. The girl did not speak for hours. When she finally did, she asked, "Is it true?" Lina smiled softly. "What part?" "The part where love made everything okay." Lina took her hand, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Love did not make everything easy. It made everything worth it." That night, the girl slept under the olive tree. She dreamed of a man with wise eyes and soft robes, of a woman who stood beside him with a quiet strength. When she woke, she asked if she could stay. Lina nodded, and just like that, another life began to mend. More came. A boy with a stutter and a sketchbook. A widow who had not spoken since her husband's death. A mother and son who had fled war. The home stretched and grew, not with marble or gold, but with rooms filled with laughter, walls covered in drawings, beds warmed by blankets sewn from old clothes. Every child learned the story, not just as history, but as a promise that no act of love is ever wasted. Sami's paintings hung in every hallway. Jamil's music played softly in the evenings, and Noura's letters, now bound in a book, were read aloud on cold nights by the fire. One letter always stirred the heart of every listener. It read, "If you are hurting, Know that healing begins where love is offered freely. Do not rush the pain. Let it teach you. Let it change you. And when you are ready, offer someone else what was once given to you. That letter became the motto of the foundation. It was carved into the stone steps at the entrance. Visitors paused to read it. Some cried. Some smiled. All understood. The palace never felt like a palace again. Felt like a village. A sanctuary. A living memory of what love can do. When it is given gently, quietly, and without condition. And through all the years. Through every soul that walked those halls. Through every leaf that fell from the olive tree. The story lived on. Not just as history. Not just as legend. But as truth. A truth simple and eternal. When love stays, even in the face of pain, it leaves behind more than memories. It leaves behind life. Years later, when Yusuf had grown into a tall, steady man, he stood beneath the olive tree with children gathered around him, just as he once had been. He held Noura's letter book in his hands. Its pages were soft with age, but the words still shone with quiet power. The children leaned in close, eyes wide, hearts open. Yusuf read aloud, his voice calm, his eyes distant, remembering the boy he once was. And when he closed the book, he told them, "This story is not only theirs, it is ours now. We are its continuation. We are its meaning." They asked him questions. Did Omar ever get angry? Was Noura ever afraid again? Did the love really never fade? He smiled. Not with certainty, but with truth. Omar was human. He had regrets, but never for choosing kindness. And Noura, she was afraid sometimes, but love gave her courage. The children were silent, absorbing each word like light. Later that evening, Yusuf placed a new letter in the tree's wooden box. It was not to Noura, nor to his lost past. It was to the child he had once been. And said, "You were not alone. You were never broken. You were simply waiting for love to find you." And it did. Let it guide you forever. The olive tree now bore fruit every spring. Its leaves shimmered silver in the sunlight. Scholars came to study it. Artists came to paint it. Lovers came to marry beneath it. Each visitor left something behind. Poem. A drawing. Letter. A piece of themselves woven into the legacy. Of a love that never asked to be remembered, but always would be. The foundation expanded beyond the village. Schools opened in distant towns. Clinics built where there had been none. Books written in many languages. All traced back to one story. One night. One act of grace. Even as generations passed, no one forgot. Because when something is true, it does not fade with time, grows with it. And long after Omar and Noura's names had become threads in the fabric of legend, the olive tree still stood, still rooted, still blossoming, still whispering to those who paused long enough to listen. And if you ever find yourself there, if you ever sit beneath its branches, and close your eyes, you may hear what the wind has carried through the years. Not a tale of riches, not a tale of youth, but a tale of quiet love. Stronger than fear, wiser than doubt, gentler than time. A tale that began with a trembling heart, soft voice, and a choice. To heal, to love. And so the story went on. Not as something finished, but as something living. Each soul that passed through the home Omar and Noura built, added a line, a moment, lesson. There was Amina, a girl who had never spoken a word, who one day stood before the olive tree, and sang for the first time. Her voice trembled, but the words were steady. A lullaby her mother once hummed. No one clapped, no one moved. They simply listened, with their hearts wide open. There was Tariq, a young man who once believed anger was the only way to be seen. He arrived with fists clenched and eyes full of fire. But in the silence of the courtyard, in the peace of others' kindness, his rage softened. He began carving wood. delicate birds, gentle faces, open hands. His sculptures were placed around the home, each with a small inscription. What we carry can become what we give. And there was Hannah, born in the very room where Noura once stood trembling on her wedding night. She was raised by the community, by the love of many hearts. She called no one mother or father, but she was never alone. Hannah became a storyteller. She traveled across the country, with a small trunk of letters and poems. She spoke in whispers, in slow, steady lines. People cried, not from sorrow, but from recognition, because in her words, they found pieces of themselves. They thought the world had forgotten, and still the olive tree grew. Its roots spread deeper, its branches wider, its presence quieter, yet stronger than ever. One day, a great storm swept through the region. Winds howled, the skies darkened, the village trembled. Many trees were torn from the ground, homes damaged, fences shattered, but the olive tree stood, unmoved, unbroken, as if the love it had witnessed made its roots unshakable. After the storm, villagers gathered in the courtyard. They looked at the tree, at the home, at each other. They began to rebuild, not from despair, but from devotion, 'cause they knew, some things are worth preserving, some stories are worth living, and some love, the truest kind, never ends. Years from now, perhaps centuries, the home may change, walls may shift, names may fade, but beneath that olive tree, someone will always be telling a story, a real one, true one, of a young woman who found courage in the arms of an old soul, of a man who believed it was never too late to love without condition, of a first night that did not break her, but began to heal him, and of the many lives that bloomed because two hearts chose tenderness over fear. And so, each generation became both student and teacher. Each child raised beneath the tree grew up knowing that love is not just something you feel, it is something you do. They learned that kindness is not weakness, that listening can be louder than speaking, that healing takes time, and time is the greatest gift you can give. In the quiet hours of the evening, the courtyard would glow with lantern light. Stories would be told in low, soft voices. Some were new, and others were old retellings of that first night. The night Noura stood barefoot and afraid, and found not power or possession, but patience, a gentle voice, a room full of silence that said, "You are safe." Visitors continued to arrive, not to take pictures, but to feel something, to remember something, to reconnect with a truth that had been buried by pain or time. Among them was a woman from a distant country. She had suffered much. She carried grief like a shawl around her shoulders. She came not expecting anything, only needing somewhere quiet. She sat beneath the olive tree for hours, saying nothing. Then she wrote a single sentence, and placed it in the box. "He never held me gently, but now I know how it should have felt." That letter changed something, not just in her, but in the others who read it later. With her permission, it reminded them that love, real love, never forces, never rushes, never takes more than it gives. And through all of this, the home lived, not in stone, but in memory, in motion, in care passed from one soul to the next. Eventually Youssef grew old. His hair turned silver, his hands lined with years of service. He did not leave. He simply moved slower, spoke softer, and smiled more often. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he gathered the children and told them his last story. He spoke not of Noura or Omar directly, but of a seed. A seed, he said, that was planted in fear, but watered with patience, grown with kindness, and strengthened by sacrifice. It became a tree, he said, but not just one you see. It became this home. It became all of you. Then he looked at Hannah. now a woman of quiet authority and fierce grace. He handed her the letter book. "It is your turn now," he said. "Keep the story true." And she did. When Yusuf passed, the village did not mourn him with black clothes or loud cries. They lit candles, sang his favorite song beneath the olive tree, and read his very first letter aloud, the one he had written as a boy, tucked into the wooden box so long ago. The words were simple. "If someone reads this, I want you to know, I am not afraid anymore." And so his story, too, became part of the tree, part of the roots, part of the wind, and still today, if you listen with your whole heart, you may hear it, in the rustling of the leaves, in the quiet footsteps of children, in the pages of a worn letter book passed from hand to hand. Real story, true story, the kind that reminds us, love does not need to be loud to change the world, just needs to be real. Years passed, and Hannah carried the legacy with a grace that echoed Noura's quiet strength. She taught the children that stories were not just words on pages. They were bridges between hearts. They were medicine. They were maps through the dark. The home became known across countries, not as an orphanage, not as a shelter, but as the house of gentle beginnings. People came not just to visit, but to stay, to help, to learn what it meant to live a life shaped by love that asked for nothing in return. They swept floors, planted herbs in the garden, taught music, and listened, truly listened, to the stories tucked inside each small aching heart. Some days were quiet, some days were heavy, but none were empty. One morning a letter arrived in the mail. It was addressed to no one, written in a delicate, unfamiliar hand. Hannah opened it slowly. Inside was a simple note. "I was the man who once sent her away. I was wrong, but her story reached me, and I have been changed." There was no signature, only a pressed jasmine flower enclosed, the petals dry, but still fragrant. Hannah closed her eyes and smiled. Forgiveness, she knew, did not need a name, only truth. That evening, she placed the letter beneath the olive tree. Among the others, it was added to the archive, to be read by those who needed to remember that change is possible, even when it comes late. As the years rolled forward like soft tides, the house of gentle beginnings became a lighthouse for the lost, a sanctuary for the broken, a school for the heart. One winter, a boy named Amir arrived. He had eyes that looked older than his age, and hands that had known work, not play. He did not trust easily. He flinched at kindness. But Hannah never hurried him. She gave him space, and time, then a chance. Amir learned to bake bread. He liked the quiet math of it. Flour, salt, water, patience. One day he baked a loaf in the shape of a heart. He left it on Hannah's windowsill without a word. It was his first offering, and she understood. He was learning to give, because he had finally learned to receive. That was the lesson Noura once carried in her eyes. The lesson Omar had learned too late, yet just in time. Love is not only a gift, it is a responsibility. To hold another's heart gently. When it is easier to walk away. To listen. When silence would be safer. To soften. Even when the world has been cruel. That lesson now bloomed in every corner of the house. In the meals made by many hands. In the lullabies hummed by those who once needed them. In the stories read aloud under the starlit sky. And the olive tree, taller now, its trunk twisted with time and tenderness, watched over them all. It had become a witness, a monument not to a person, but to a decision, to love, when it would have been easier not to. And so the story continues, one heart at a time, one letter at a time, one quiet miracle at a time, still real, still true, still changing the world, without asking for applause. Years later, a young filmmaker from another country arrived. She had heard whispers of the olive tree, the house, the stories. She had lost her mother the year before. Her grief was silent, but deep. She came not with a camera. but with a notebook. She sat beneath the tree for 3 days, writing nothing, just watching, just listening. Children brought her tea, sang songs they had learned from Hannah, offered her pieces of flatbread shaped like suns. On the 4th day, she asked if she could tell their story to the world. Hannah smiled gently and said, "You may, but tell it with your whole heart, or not at all." The young woman nodded, tears catching in the corners of her eyes. She stayed for months. She worked beside them, carried water, read bedtime stories, planted marigolds near the stone steps. Only then did she begin filming, not just the tree, but the hands that held each other, the laughter in the kitchen, the silent moments of someone healing beside someone who stayed. The film, when it was finished, was called A House with No Locks. It was shown in festivals, classrooms, living rooms. People cried, not because it was tragic, but because it was true, because it reminded them that love is not made of grand gestures, but small ones. Cup of warm tea, a letter never thrown away, a promise kept quietly across decades. After the film, strangers began to send their own stories to the House of Gentle Beginnings. Letters, paintings, pieces of broken things mended with gold. They said things like, "Your story helped me speak again. I remembered how to love my son. I forgave myself after 30 years. And Hannah, now silver-haired, still walked the halls at night, still sat beneath the tree, still read every letter sent, no matter how short, no matter how heavy." She often said, "The olive tree does not ask if you are worthy of shelter. It simply offers shade." And one summer evening, as fireflies danced like sparks of memory, a girl stood beneath the branches, hands trembling. She read aloud a letter she had written, her voice small but steady. "I never believed love could be real, but now I know. Does not have to be perfect. It just has to be patient." Everyone clapped softly, not for the performance, but for the courage. That night, Hannah whispered to the wind, "You were right, Noura." The first night did not end the story. It began 1,000 more. And still the tree grows. Still the letters come. Still the love continues. Because once a heart has been held gently, remembers how. And once a story like this is told, it never truly ends. It only finds new voices to carry it forward. One morning, a soft rain fell across the courtyard. The olive leaves glistened, each drop catching the early light like tiny stars. Children ran barefoot in the puddles, their laughter echoing against the old stone walls. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Hannah stood at the window, watching them with a quiet smile. She held a new letter in her hands, had no return address, just a single word on the envelope. "Thank you." She opened it slowly, as she had done hundreds of times before. Inside was a short message, written in a careful hand. "I was born because she stayed. My mother never told me the full story, but she always said love saved her. Now I understand. I will teach my children the same." There was no name, but it did not matter. The story had traveled further than they had ever imagined. It had reached the children of the children, carried not by pages, but by the lives that had been reshaped, by love's quiet insistence. Later that day, Hannah walked slowly to the olive tree. She tucked the letter into the wooden box, now aged and full, but still strong. She placed her hand on the trunk, not to hold herself up, but to offer thanks. As the rain fell softer, she whispered, "Let every person who stands here feel what I once felt, the beginning of healing." And from that day forward, the tree was given a new name by the children. They called it the tree that waits. 'Cause no matter who you were, no matter how lost you had been, it would wait for you, to rest, to breathe, to believe again. In time, Hannah passed, peacefully, surrounded by song and sunlight, her hands holding the letter book, her head resting against the shoulder of a young girl she had once carried as a baby. They did not bury her with flowers. They planted a new olive tree beside the old one, and from its roots, a second life began, not to replace, but to continue. Today, if you walk through that village, you will find the house of gentle beginnings still open, still filled with voices, still healing. You will find the twin olive trees standing side by side, their branches woven together by years of wind and story. And beneath them, a carved wooden sign reads, "Real love waits, real love listens, real love remains." And you will know, in that quiet moment, this is not just a story, it is a truth. It began with one night, with one woman, one choice, and it lives on, because it was never just about them. It was about us all. As the years unfolded gently, like pages in a well-loved book, the house of gentle beginnings became more than a home. It became a symbol, a reminder that even the smallest acts of love can echo through generations. People still come from every corner of the world, not to take, but to give, not to fix others, but to be healed themselves. They arrive carrying burdens, and leave carrying each other. The olive trees continue to grow, side by side, like wisdom and kindness, like memory and hope. Every letter ever written is kept safe. Every story told is respected. And every heart, no matter how broken, is welcomed without question. And now, as the sun sets each evening, the children gather under the trees. They hold hands. They read aloud from the letter book. Their voices, though young, are steady, 'cause they know they are the future born from a moment of courage in the past. And the story always ends with these words. Love is not what you say. Love is what you do. When no one is watching. When it is hardest. When it is needed most. This is the real story. True one. And it belongs to all of us. Moral of the story. When love is patient, it becomes powerful. When love is gentle, it becomes unforgettable. And when love is shared, it becomes eternal. No act of love is ever wasted. Even the quietest kindness can become the root of a forest that will shelter souls for generations to come.